Crazy, but lots of action on the forum. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ann. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, let's start out with you were in Brazil, but then we talked to you last time while you were in Brazil, and then you got back. So you hadn't done a coach's minute, and you're reading the Sports Gene right now. And I know it's you're really into it, and you came up with something today. Are bad coaches ruining good athletes? Let's get into this one.
Well, I've been saying that for a while. I wrote that rehab injury in the elite fast twitch athlete a while ago. Um, and as I said, I don't think sometimes when you write these, they don't get a lot of views. I think, and that's why I went the social media route today, because I think in that situation we can reach whatever 70,000 people via Instagram, and I don't think 70,000 people read that article. But it's I've I've had this feeling for a long time, and I said this to you I think in other situations, but I've been able to deal with the what I would call the super elite in baseball, between with the Red Sox, and in soccer and in ice hockey. And the one thing that you realize is there's a lot of these super elite guys that get a bad reputation, and they get labeled as soft or injury prone. And the thing in Sports Gene, Epstein's thing, just hopped off the page at me in terms of this Danish study. And Jacobson, I think, was the guy's name. Basically, and it was really related to muscle fiber type. But one of the things he started out with, the idea that, or not, his finding was that Danish soccer players had roughly the same fiber type makeup as the average Dane. And he said, that's really weird. Why, these guys should have more fast twitch fiber. There should be something unusual about them. So he went to the academy and he asked the guys at the academy why they thought this was true. And the guys very matter-of-factly said something to the effect of, well, the best guys get ruined early and don't make it to the pros because, they're pulling muscles and getting hurt. And soccer is notorious. Soccer is the worst they love the fitness idea, and they love jogging and small-sided games and things where you don't get the top speed. So I'm actually in the process of writing the article, and I'm pulling together like JB Marin's sprinting as a vaccine article and trying to pull this whole thing together into a longer piece. But I just thought I'm going to try it the social media route and see what we get from that.
Yeah. So when you say ruin, like let's go back into that. How are the bad coaches ruining? Are basically by not allowing them to sprint, because by not allowing them to express that genetic potential or develop that genetic potential?
I think it's by, and I hate to say this now because it goes against what I used to believe about coaching, but by treating them like everyone else, they get these guys hurt. These are guys that probably shouldn't be jogging and probably need to get exposed to more high-speed sprinting is what you get. And have you read, oh my God, what was the name of the book? It was Speed Trap. So in Speed Trap, which was it was Charlie Francis, but it was more the story of Charlie Francis and Ben Johnson, not the training book, not Training for Speed or Charlie Francis training system. But one of the things that Francis talked about, and I've known this for a long time, is that your sprinters, they tend to appear lazy because they kind of know what's not good for them, and they don't want to do it. They don't want to jog. They don't want to do slow stuff. And they do tend to get beat up easier, and they do tend to get more smaller injuries. And so I think what happens is, as a coach, you think you have this mentality of everybody's the same. I'm going to treat everybody the same. Nobody's special. And I get that from a team standpoint because I was always that guy. Everybody's going to do the same thing. But I'm starting to realize that with these, especially in this like super elite category, when you get this guy who's showing you this really unusual power, and this is a guy who's got the 36 to 40 inch vertical jump, and this is a guy that runs the sub 4.4 40 or whatever your test is in your particular sport, you need to be more careful with that guy because he's going to be what makes him good gives him a level of fragility. And I need to go back and read that Anti-Fragile book, which I haven't read yet. And you can't train it out of him. And I use the racehorse analogy. It's like you can't take like Seattle Slew and say, hey, I'm going to hook this sucker up to a plow here for, 5 or 6 months and plow the fields with him. and make him more resilient to injury. It just doesn't work. And it's not worked for years in sports. And we've blamed the players, called them soft, called them injury prone. And if you look at, particularly at Epstein's stuff, you start to see there is a genetic difference. And I think everybody knows it, but they don't want to acknowledge it because they're so worried about team dynamics, which I really get. Like I'm totally with people on the idea, but I still think, I think there's bigger picture stuff that you have to look at.
Okay, so let's keep going though. When you say, we have to be careful with them, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean we need to, like, okay, you're saying you're tired, so you're not going to do this? Or what exactly do you mean by careful?
That's what's interesting. And this is where, you know me, I'm kind of anti-monitoring, but I think it's asking somebody, and this is where I do think the questionnaires come in, and asking people how they feel. And what you've really got to be able to do, you have to figure out, do I have a soft guy that doesn't want to work? Or do I have a very intuitive guy who knows what he needs? That's not easy. The younger the kids are, the harder that is. But we do this with my kids. Like I always talk about my 14-year-old group. But one of the things that we say, and we do it with our pro guys too, is I tell the guys all the time, when we're going to sprint, I need to know that you're 100% ready to sprint. If you're not, I don't want you to do it. Now, if I got a guy who, we went 3 weeks and he's never run a sprint, that's a problem. That means I got to get him in the training room, in treatment. And one of the things that we used to do at BU was, it was basically, if you're too hurt to do everything, you're too hurt to practice. And if you're too hurt to practice, you can't play in the game. And that used to kind of weed stuff out a little bit in terms of, when guys start figuring out, I can go in and say my knee's a little sore and I don't have to lift. And then I can go back to the coach and say, I think I can go and practice. And they're going to let me practice. When you start to have those kind of inequities is where you have team problems. Our situation was, hey, if you're hurt, you should be in the training room every day getting treatment. If you're complaining about an injury that's causing you to not be able to do everything that we're asking you to do, you should be in the training room every single day getting that injury taken care of. And so I guess the idea is that things all need to add up in all the right columns. So if I've got a guy who said, hey, I'm in the training room every day working with the trainers, getting my hamstring treated, doing the things that I need to do, and I'm saying that I can't sprint, I'm probably going to be okay with that guy. If I got a guy who's coming into me and saying, oh, man, I'm a little tight, I can't sprint today, but he manages to go to practice and do everything, then I'm going to have a problem with that guy. And Sean Skane kind of alluded to it in his comment on my Instagram. You get into kind of, you've really got to start teasing out, who's who. And the thing that I saw, though, is that it was still happening at the super elite level. Okay, I had guys with the Red Sox who were the best of the best, and people were still saying they were soft. And I'm like, these guys are not soft. These guys are supermen. But they're not average, and you can't treat that super above average guy like he's average. You just can't do it. And I think it's a difficult situation, but I think it's something that we need to bring to light. We need to put it out in front of everybody and say, hey, take a look at this. Think, have you ever done this? Have you had that guy where you said, oh, he's soft? And I look at it and think, particularly like, let's say you've got a guy, you've got an outfielder in baseball, and he's got a sore hamstring and he says he can't sprint. He's no good to you. It's no different than a pitcher saying, my arm's sore, I can't throw. And you might look at him and think, gee, looks fine. But it's weird. In pitching, we've gotten to the point where we acknowledge the guy. And in maybe in the field positions, this is just relating to baseball, we haven't done that. I know in soccer, it's the same thing. Soccer, they're always like, you got to be fit enough to play 90. And I'm kind of like, why not have a really good player who can play 45? I don't understand the fit enough to play 90 thing. I get it. You'd like that guy to be in the game the whole time. But what I'd like more is to have my best player playing. And if that meant he's not quite ready to go 90, then he's not. And there's just a lot of this, and we allude to this all the time. This is the way it's always been done sort of thing that makes it difficult to manage the true elites.
Well, it's funny you brought up monitoring, because that was what really came up in my head. And I was like, this is going to conflict really with what Mike is really kind of traditionally thought about kind of getting to.
Yeah, but in a way it doesn't. because I always feel like the best monitoring. Have you ever read? I think it was Peter Drucker used to talk about management by walking around in one of the Peter Drucker books, and I'm pretty sure it was a Peter Drucker business book, but he called it management by walking around, and he said he'd walk around the factory or the office or whatever and talk to people. And I still think that's your best monitoring. I'm really big on monitoring, but I do my own monitoring by walking around, talking to guys. How do you feel? You know, by really looking guys in the face and saying, tell me the truth. You know, I don't want to hear the bullshit. I don't want to hear the I can go. You know, I had 2 new pitchers in today, young minor league guys, and I give them the standard speech. You know, I don't need heroes. You need to tell me if something doesn't feel right. And I always tell everybody the worst conversation I can have is, this has been bothering me for 3 weeks, but I didn't want to say anything. You know, that's like, to me, nothing will make me more angry. And I had a kid yesterday in Mark's group pull his quad a little bit. And he said, same thing, you know, kids always say, I felt it a little on the one before. And I'm like, how many times do we have to tell you that you've got to tell us what you're feeling? And so I think that is monitoring. And I think it's monitoring at the highest level. But part of monitoring, and this is where, you know, we've had, like, as I said, we've had this conversation numerous times, is also knowing the personality of people and trying to figure out, is this person trying to get over on me? Or is this person legitimate?
Yeah.
And if you're always talking to your athletes, like I know right off the bat, I used to always say, like, when I'm asking guys how they feel, I know whose opinions I'm valuing. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, like as a team, are we tired? I know who to ask. You know, I'm not asking the hardest working guy because he's always going to say no. And I'm not asking the lazy, soft guy because he's always going to say yes. You know, I need to go to the middle of the road guy and be like, how do you feel? You know, how do your legs feel? Are you tired? So I do think that there really is an art, and this is why I laugh kind of, you know, all the sports science stuff. I mean, I've been doing sports science for a really long time, probably, you know, really good sports science for 20 years, talking to guys about injuries and can they play and managing training load, figuring out how much this guy can practice. And I can remember, I'll go back to the Cam Neely days. I used to make him, people used to look at me and think, how can you make him get off the ice? I'm like, I make him, I walk out there. I stand on the bench and I'm like, you got to get off. You were supposed to skate for a half hour. And guys used to look at me in those days at the Bruins and be like, I can't believe he gets away with this shit. You know, that he's going out there and telling our best player he has to get off the ice. But I knew that from a training load standpoint, you know, we had to up the amount of skating. And I was like, okay, you got 30 minutes today. That's all you get. I don't care how good you feel, you get 30 minutes. If you're fine tomorrow, we'll give you 35. And I would legit go out and just be like, get off. And, you know, so it's, you know, so it's the art. I really do believe that we're still talking about the art.
Well, that's the problem then. That's probably the argument that I can make right now, is that it's the art, and you have a lot of experience. You have a certain personality, like you always said about Great Cook. Sometimes Great Cook doesn't realize he's Great Cook. Maybe you don't realize you're Mike Boyle. And so, like, you have a certain way about you where young coaches, and, you know, you've just proven as well, you're like, as good as you are, as long as you've been doing this, you still get kids, oh, I've been hurting for 3 weeks, the last one hurt me. So that system really isn't foolproof, as opposed to somebody who was really doing some other kind of, you know, electronic monitoring, et cetera.
I think that's where we realize the difficulties of this particular situation is that, and it's hard for young guys to develop those relationships. But when I was doing this stuff at the Bruins, I was 30 years old. And I just thought, you know, I can remember, and I've said this before on podcasts, I was like, I'm either going to succeed or get fired. You know, one of 2 things is going to happen here, but I'm not going to go down not trying, not swinging, not taking the attempt to do what I think is right. And I think that's part of the problem too. And that's why I said, I think, you know, whatever, wellness question, if there's a million things people can do, you know, whether it's like Devin, you know, looking at, you know, TRIMP and things like this from your heart rate monitors, I think it's all part of the process, but there is, and this is why you need experienced coaches, there is an intuitive aspect to this thing that is real. And it's that way with sport coaches. You've got to be able to look and think, okay, this guy is telling me the truth versus this guy's not telling me the truth. This guy's trying to get over on me versus this guy's giving me very straight information. And you're right. It's not easy, and it is. And you know me, I can be incredibly inconsistent in terms of changing my mind. And it's one of those things that I would be, if I was in a team sports setting right now, I would be doing things much, much different than I did in the team sports setting in 2012 and 2013 when I was with the Red Sox, or even in 2011-12 when I was at BU, because I know more.
Yeah.
And I think that's I love the Maya Angelou quote, do the best you can where you are with what you have. And I'm pretty sure that's Maya Angelou. If I'm wrong, someone I'm sure will correct me one of these days. But that's what you've got to be doing. You've got to be doing the best job you can where you are with what you have. And all I'm trying to do is put some information out there. And it's really interesting because people push back on this stuff. And as with so much of the stuff that I tend to put out there, people push back because people don't want to change. People don't want to think. And it's not that they don't want to get better, but it's probably a little bit of that Dunning-Kruger idea in terms of they already think they're pretty good. And that's a problem.
Yeah, well, I think, almost like we can even take this conversation. Like you think you're pretty good at that, and I think you are too. But like it's almost like a lie detector test. Like we can certainly be like, Mike looks like he's sweating, and I've seen guys like there's certain cues. But if I gave you a lie detector test, that would be better. So that to me is the monitoring where, like, especially with young coaches, if you're using that technology to help them learn. Now sometimes it's the other way around. I used to be, I could look at a map. I'm really good. I'm great with direction east, west. But now I use Google Maps because sometimes it helps you with the traffic. And now my sense of direction isn't as good. So the technology can take it away. So there's still got to be some kind of a balance there.
No, you're right. I agree 100%. And I guess my thing is that the pendulum has swung too heavily towards the technology and too much away from the human. I guarantee you, if you got Bob Alejo on and had the same conversation with him that we just had, that he'd say the same exact thing. I've been doing monitoring for 40 years. I've been talking to guys and asking them how they feel, and and looking at guys and trying to analyze, okay, what type of guy is this? And I think the difference is where this really applies is at the highest levels.
You're right.
Because this is, again, it's where the screw-ups are way more costly at the highest level if you get somebody hurt. And I just think as coaches, as sport coaches, we want to over-practice everybody because that's what we do. And as sports scientists, strength and conditioning specialists, performance enhancement specialists, whatever we are this week, we want to load manage people. And we want to figure out in terms of, it's the bucket filling thing again, right? We want to make sure, the coaches, they just want to keep filling that practice bucket all day, every day. The more, the better. The basketball teams bring in, a shooting specialist and this guy and that guy. And then everybody's got overuse stuff going on. We get knee things and ankle things and, stuff. And you think, God, these guys, they just need to do less. And whenever you say do less, there was a Twitter guy last night, again, it's the Mike Boyle's a pansy, softy, too many touchy-feely coaches. And it's like, no, that's not what it's about. But there is some happy medium here that we need to find and that we're not finding.
Yeah, I think you just said it too. You're like, okay, I think this is for the super elite. And that's part of the problem as well, because that's really, we're looking at, the 1%, right? Like, and that's probably not the best way to approach teaching a lot of programming, et cetera, because we're never going to have, so many of us are never going to have that 1% of that group. So when you're speaking about the elite, maybe we should, how do we do this with not only general population, but really let's call it the high school, the middle school, the high school and college athletes who are not the elite?
Yeah. And that's what I think I said. I think I wrote one of the responses on the Instagram. And I said, basically for me, it's a situation of realizing that if I've got to choose buckets, I'm going to choose the high intensity speed bucket over the endurance bucket. I think that's the simple rule of thumb. And that's the one I've been following. And again, people who've been listening to this podcast for a long time will know I said this about Michaela. in terms of, hey, I'm either going to be right or wrong. And I'm in that situation with Mark. I'm either going to be right or wrong in terms of we haven't been doing a lot of conditioning. I'm letting the conditioning come from practice. And it's like speed and power, speed and power, speed and power. You know, we're sprinting, we're jumping, we're lifting, and we're not doing a heck of a lot of conditioning. And I might look at, we might have to do this podcast in, 2023 when Mark's going to be a freshman in college. And I might be like, man, his conditioning just wasn't good as a senior, and I wish I'd done more. Or I'm going to tell you that, man, I'm so glad we did all that speed work because he's running by people right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, he's running by people. So I'm looking at that and thinking we're on the right track. But if you looked at the Twitter feed the other day, Rob Assisi said something about, puberty making bad coaches look good since the year 10,000 BC. It's like,
that's awesome.
I loved it too. And then I said, steroids making coaches look good since 1970. But it's, we don't know the answers. I think we can only propose the solution that we think is best at that particular time. And then, and again, be free to change our mind and realize, like, okay, I'm more than happy. I think about, like the Dave Tenney's of the world, who I've learned so much from, guys like that, where I think, and I think probably guys like Devin have done the same thing. The key is to be listening all the time and to think, okay, can this help me? And if it can, then let's try it. And then realize that I don't have to get married to it. I don't have to stick to it the rest of my life. I just need to try it.
Yeah.
And you know me, that's where I'm at all the time.
Good stuff. Coach, what about, I want to go over that. We had a great discussion